we're going to talk a bit about Regulatory Standards Bill now. We're going to talk about how it could affect the laws and regulation in your area and what could change. We are going to welcome to the show, friend of the show, I lost my mouse, always do that, described on her website as reliable, professional and accurate translation and quality assurance, a licensed Te Reo Māori translator interpreter. It is Melanie Nelson. Melanie, hello and welcome to the show.
Kia ora, Pat. Kia ora, Chewie. A tēnā koutou katoa.
I just want to say to people about this, we have a QR code coming up during this conversation, and it's going to help you, people watching, be informed of what's going on and what Melanie's going to speak to. So get your phones ready to grab it, because it's going to be on a document on the screen, so we're not going to be able to leave it up the whole time. We will bring it back through the show, but if you want access to this document that Melanie is going to talk about, a QR code is going to come up on the screen shortly. And get your phone, crack, and then you'll be able to go straight into it all for yourself. Melanie, here we are on the eve of the eve. Is that right? The eve of the eve? Of the Regulatory Standards Bill submissions finishing. Am I right? Is it 1 p.m. Friday? Is that right, Chewie? You said that last night, didn't you?
1 p.m. Monday.
1 p.m. Monday.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So we got the weekend.
I mean, that's a little bit unusual in itself. It's usually like 11:59 p.m. So yeah.
And I think last time with the Treaty Principles Bill, the portal crashed in the night and no one was there to fix it. So given it's already crashed a few times, the 1 p.m. deadline's probably wise.
Do we have any ideas about numbers yet? I mean, the last one, the Treaty Principles, got 300,000 submissions. Do we know yet? Do we have any idea?
Yeah, there was something out the other day to say there was already 70-something thousand. So That's pretty amazing with still close to a week to go at that point.
I wonder if they'll get above 0.3% approval, like their last round of submissions for this pile of horse shit got. But first of all, Melanie, I think what we should just do is give you some window, just to start on the same page, is give us a real quick heads up, if you could, about what this thing is, and then we can talk about the why. So the Regulatory Standards Bill, how do you describe it? What are they trying to do?
So there's a few great phrases have been used to describe this, which I think all sum it up quite well. One is an attempt to cripple government from acting in the public interest. Another is a neoliberal sausage maker or cookie cutter for our laws, or a Bill of Rights for corporations. And the other day I interviewed Duncan Webb and he described it as a block of butter issue. So it really can be described in so many ways, and that's probably quite confusing. The Treaty Principles Bill 2.0 is another one. But really, the way it can be so many different things at once is, I think, the key term for it is the everything bill, which Jonathan Boston coined when I interviewed him last year. And so it is a bill which would affect everything because it seeks to rewrite most of our laws in alignment with its principles, which are a particular libertarian set of principles. And so if you sort of imagine the RSB as sitting inside a 100-sided prism or a centagon, and then whatever angle you view from within it, you see a different aspect of society, whether it's health, education, climate, justice, te tiriti, infrastructure, care, whatever. And so each lens focuses your attention on particular aspects, but all the others remain in your peripheral vision. So that's how the bill is so far-reaching, because it really touches everything.
I do like the use of the word centagon. I think we should try and get that in every single show we do from now on, Chewie. So is it kind of fair to say if it was good policy, it could be quite useful, but if it was bad policy, it's going to be quite destructive?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And, what's as important as what's in the bill is what's missing from the bill. So the bill has a set of principles that are called the principles of responsible regulation, and they're largely libertarian and ACT party policy principles. But missing from those policies, they centre around property rights and individual rights and keeping government really small, limiting what it can do. But missing are things that we would currently balance in our lawmaking processes, like the public good, the environment, future generations, human rights, our international obligations, te tiriti or waitangi, and it's Parliament's role to balance all of those. So this is an attempt to prioritise a specific set of rights over others.
The way I hear you describe it just then, a few buzzwords that came out was ACT policy. Is this cramming what ACT wants into legislation above and beyond what even, quote unquote, the right would want? Like if this was, these things that are going to change, are they also going to be what National wants? Or is it really just the 8% party changing all of these laws within New Zealand to best suit their agenda within New Zealand?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think within National at the moment, there's a reasonably strong libertarian wing, but there's also the traditional conservative or more Christian wings of National. So I suspect that there would be some National MPs that would be quite supportive of these principles and others who are probably really not, as they're discovering what's in the RSB here.
Melanie has offered at the end of our little chat to answer any specific questions from people. So again, we will say no guarantees every question will be asked and answered. But if you do have a specific question for Melanie about the RSB, then feel free to chuck it in the chat. We'll keep an eye on it and try and, if we see any Chewie, we can maybe star them and see if we can put them to Melanie at the end. Also, understanding that your question may well get answered within our conversation. So we'll see how that pans out. Chewie, do you want to ask anything before we go to the very impressive document that we're going to look at to see what how it educates us on the regulatory standards bill?
Anything specific at this stage, so let's move on to the document.
Yeah, maybe should I just run through like the 4 bullet points of the key things in the Act for anyone that's not familiar with it?
Yeah, so this is before the document? We're not going to the document yet? Yeah, talk about
just so people know if they haven't come across it yet. So as I mentioned, there's this set of principles of responsible regulation, and responsible is quite important here. It's a bit of an attempt to say that anything outside of that, Parliament can still look at it, but it would have to be justified as, I guess, irresponsible regulation if it's not within responsible. So most new and existing legislation should be consistent with the principles. It's not binding, but they'd have to publicly justify if they're inconsistent with it. And so there's a lot of layers of soft power in here, which the economist Jeff Bertram has called poison pills. It also gives significant powers to the Minister for Regulation, which is currently David Seymour. And it sets up a regulatory standards board, which he appoints, and it's accountable to him. And they take complaints from the public and can investigate legislation which is inconsistent with what's essentially the ACT party principles in this bill.
All right. Wow. Okay.
That is wide-ranging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we hear you saying the everything bill. It's very wide-ranging, isn't it? Chewie, I see you've marked some already. Should we ask a couple of questions now rather than leaving kind of 20 till the end of the show? You can decide how that runs, sir. You've marked a few.
I think that I'm going to leave that question to last because it's great. We've got a question here. What scope does the bill have to change the principles? Can the Minister of Regulation make changes, or would they have to go through an amendment bill?
Yeah, great question. So I think that probably Parliament could change what the principles were. The Minister couldn't amend the bill directly, but quite importantly, that leads you to how are the principles defined? And they're actually not defined in the bill, but the Minister for Regulation and the Attorney General will issue the guidance about how they are to be interpreted and applied. So again, it leaves a huge amount of that power and decision making with the Minister for Regulation.
And it's in the ballot. Asks, could the RSB override local councils' decisions like environment or hazard designations?
Yeah, so the RSB doesn't directly override anything. What would happen is that the RSB, if it gets put into law, then our laws and regulations under it would be reviewed for consistency with it, and then they'd either be amended to make them consistent with all its principles, or it would have to be publicly justified why they weren't being amended. But bylaws are included, so it covers primary and secondary legislation, most primary and secondary legislation. I'm not quite sure where the designations sit whether they're in regulation or legislation or if they're a separate thing. So it would depend on that. But overall, even if they're outside, there's likely to be a huge shift in what's prioritised and valued by government and by councils to avoid this huge, massive red tape of having to review and justify and amend and publicly defend why they're acting outside of these principles of responsible regulation. So that's some of that sort of soft power and added layers of bureaucracy and red tape that will really tie government and councils in not fulfilling those process requirements that are in the bill.
Talking about the everything bill, Mata has a comment as well. Mata says, it's the bill Ruth Richardson wished she could have thought of in the 1990s. You think that's fair, Melanie?
Yeah, I think maybe Ruth Richardson even did. I'm not sure, but this ideal has been around since the reforms in the 80s and the early 90s, and this government's increasingly saying it's following that kind of playbook of the 90s national government then. So this is well stated to be the missing puzzle piece, as Jane Kelsey says, from the neoliberal reforms, and something which the first version of this bill was written in 2001 by the Bryce Wilkinson for the Business Roundtable. So it's got that whakapapa right back to that time.
There's I was listening to a podcast today, forgive me, I can't remember what it was, but they were talking about the No King protests in America, and they were talking about they didn't use the word revolution, but they were basically saying all revolutions come incrementally. Like, you might think that you're only making a small change today, but in 20 years' time when the revolution happens, it started off on a bunch of these small steps. And I just thought, well, the opposite of a revolution, whatever these guys are trying to do, could also be increments of small steps. Like the day that Roe versus Wade passed in 1973, they started working on a way to overthrow it. It took them 50 years, but they got there. So these incremental steps for the good and for the bad is what we look at, unfortunately.
That's so true. And David Seymour said that this is intended to implement a culture change over decades. And, that's a culture change, not just in how government works and thinks, but, in what the public thinks and values as, within responsible regulation. He's compared it to the Public Finance Act. And we know, I know my generation, it's just normal for us that we always talk about inflation and the things which are enshrined in that act. But for generations previously, that was a new thing, and it's certainly been permeated the whole system. So I think that's how this is intended to work by its proponents.
Hey, let's have a look at this document. This document that's been prepared called the Sector-Specific Tool for the Regulatory Standards Bill. Now, this is what I was saying to whānau watching, that get your phones out if you want to have a copy of it, because there is easiest way to probably do it is right there off that QR code. Take a snapshot of the screen, get the QR code. It'll take you to the tinyurl.com/RSB tool, which is also the domain. And maybe Kiwi Scoot, you can put that into the chat as well. tinyurl.com/RSB tool, or that QR code, which we'll bring back up as we walk to it. Talk to us about this, because this looks quite detailed. If we scroll down to just the contents, there is a lot of information here. Too much, obviously, to go through, but this whole document is, as I said at the start of the show, a tool to help us reflect on how the RSB could affect laws and regulation in your area and what could change. So do you want to, I'll leave this up for a bit so people can grab that QR code. Do you want to speak to this and tell us what this is all about, Melanie?
Yeah, so this came out of a group of us thinking, well, how can the public actually get to grips with this everything bill and how it affects everything? And, it's pretty overwhelming, and the RSB looks kind of dry and boring. So at first glance, I think a lot of people would think, oh, it doesn't affect me. And we've had lots of really amazing work done on the impacts for Te Tiriti and on the environment in particular. And so those two aspects of it, I think, are quite well understood now, that it's, hugely detrimental to both of those. But we really wanted to bring attention to the huge range of impacts across every sector, whether it's conservation, climate action, banking, insurance, local government, working conditions, education, broadcasting, health, you name it, and there's probably some effects. And so this tool is really to enable people to do some thinking in their groups of friends or colleagues. Doesn't tell you what to think or say, but it offers reflective questions to really help people think critically and start conversations about this, and to participate meaningfully in the democratic process, hopefully.
So who would be the target audience to pick up this document and say, I mean, I know someone in the chat said it's only 200 pages, but yeah, that's too long for us to go through tonight. Might be a good weekend read though. Who is the target audience for this? Who is the best person to get it, to read it, and to use it?
Yeah, well, it's already been used a lot. It's only been out about a week, but we've had a huge number of messages from people from different organisations, union groups, environmental groups, political party, local groups, church groups, all sorts of people, specialists in different sectors, in the climate space, in workers' rights, in health, in the regulation of professions and education. So a huge number of people have been drawing on it. I think, if you're someone that is like, it's all too much, I don't want to think about it, I just want to know how to put in a simple submission, this is not for you. There's some really great submission builders online, and you can just put in one sentence saying, I oppose the Regulatory Standards Bill, if you do oppose it, and that is valuable, and everyone should do at least that. If you want to make a more personal submission, then tell your own story and talk about what you care about and what you value in our lawmaking and what you disagree with in this bill. But then for those who'd like to go deeper and actually understand and do some original thinking that can really inform either just themselves and their workplace or their organisation, or maybe inform the select committee of an aspect of the implications and potential flow-on effects of this bill, which otherwise won't be covered. Because I saw that the Green MP Francisco Hernandez put in some written parliamentary questions asking all the ministers what advice they'd sought on the implications of the RSB for their portfolio. And it was basically nothing came back. And that's really concerning, that we have a bill that's gone through its first reading that, if it's implemented as they would like it to be, it could lead over time to the rewriting of the laws and regulations that govern each of their portfolios, and the knowledge just isn't there about what that might entail and what it might look like. So yeah, I think it really brings it to life and grounds it for people, rather than this amorphous bureaucratic sounding thing to, what might it mean for this aspect of this thing I care about.
A question for you. It's maybe more an opinion-based question. We'll just put that QR code up one more time for people to grab it. I was going to say, we know why David Seymour says he wants to do this. I don't even know if we do know, like publicly. But why do you think he's doing this? What's behind it? I'm not saying about what's his justification, what's his political angle. Like, why do you think he is doing this?
I think it's a capture of our whole system of government to tie it in to having to work very narrowly within the values that he holds and that the ACT party hold, even when ACT is no longer in government. So to imprint a minority fringe really view and belief about what government is and what it should do. For libertarians, it really should be there just to uphold private property rights and for policing kind of reasons and to protect liberties. So to imprint that and shift the culture and thinking of how government works and what it can do, and to make the things which we currently consider normal, like the public good, which is really the reason for government being there, and looking after the environment, upholding Te Tiriti, to make them politically very difficult to do, if not almost impossible, I guess, over time.
So what I hear you saying, correct me if my paraphrase is wrong, the party that believes, the party that says they believe in individual rights and the government not telling us what to do, and the don't tread on me mentality and freedom from all these legislations is in this instance saying, hey, we know best, we're going to tell you all what to do. This is what it feels like you're saying to me.
Yeah, I think so. And you mentioned the freedom from this and that. And I think when we hear these terms, it's important to think, well, freedom for who and freedom from what? So
Yeah.
It can sound like it's, oh, that's great. It's like freedom for me from, that thing that annoys me. But it's not about you and me. It's about corporations and the wealthy. And David Seymour said as much in the first reading. He said the hard left lawyer, Jane Kelsey, has criticised this as being about protecting wealth and property. And, well, you're finally catching on, Jane. That is what it's about, basically, was the point. So I think people need to remember that individuals in our laws also includes corporations. So whenever you hear person or individual, think corporation. When you hear good for whom? For corporations and the wealthy. It's about preserving existing wealth and protecting corporate power and profits and uplifting that.
As James says, it's freedom for the most wealthy. I remember having this debate with Rodney Hyde when I interviewed him a few times, because Rodney Hyde came out when he was head of ACT saying, I always vote for what brings freedom. And I said to him, but sometimes when you bring freedom to one group of people, you oppress the other. What do you do in that instance? And of course he didn't know, because I suspect what James just said is his truthful answer was probably, well, I always vote with what brings freedom to the most wealthy. I think that's probably more the truth in what he was saying, because obviously when one person's granted a right or freedom, it has the possibility of impinging on someone else's. Not always, but it can do that. So yeah. Chewie, my friend, you've been there in the corner, sitting listening. What are your wise words of wisdom
I think
this fine evening?
I think this is really concreted in some of the positions that I was thinking about this bill basically from the get-go, that is a devious piece of legislation where its true purpose is hidden from as many people as possible, that it's been rolled out in a way that has concealed its true intention. And I think you're going to end up being highlighted as on his little hit list on his Facebook page, I think, Melanie.
Badge of honour. Melanie, badge of honour.
I'd wear it. I'd wear it proudly.
I think maybe they're avoiding drawing attention to the work I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah, well, very true. But I mean, that's the whole thing. This is like the fourth attempt to bring this piece of legislation in, and it's never got anywhere. But this seems to be like David Seymour's never going to get a coalition as soft as this one. This is his best chance to get it through, and even to the point of running the treaty's principles bill up first, knowing that it was going to be the target that everyone was going to get all righteously angry about and submit on, and then go, well, that's that job done. And even at the end of last year, where they put up the website for feedback, so people would think, I've already submitted on this one. I've already done that job. Hoping that everybody would be exhausted by all of this bullshit by the time that the real document arrives, the real piece of legislation. And then even in the language and the way it's discussed, it doesn't touch on what it actually does. It's so dense. And its meaning is so obscure that how is the standard person that doesn't spend all of their time doing submissions and looking at legal documents supposed to untangle how many nooks and crannies this piece of legislation actually goes into? I think
true.
This is a real tipping point, because if he gets it in, we have the leader of a party that has got maybe 8% in the last election, concreting in a foundation of his party's ideology into government, whether he's part of it or not, is fucking terrifying. And the piece that that really worries me is the bit about I think it's mining and exploration and that sort of thing. And like if the government changes and revokes permits or tells these companies that they've got to clean up their mess, they can be sued. The government can be sued by them, and we all get taken to court. It is a phenomenally dumb piece of legislation with vast ranging effects that we absolutely need to stop dead in its tracks.
Totally agree with you there. And you mentioned that it's had 3 attempts before, and we've got the 3 strikes back now. Is this going to be 3 strikes and it's in? Like, that's not very consistent. And really agree with what you said at the start, Chewie, about the putting up of the photos and information about the dissenters and pathologizing dissent. That's a very concerning and scary step in our politics. And I did an interview, I think, yesterday with Dame Salmond, who was, I think, today's victim on that, if people would like to hear what she says about the RSB. She's extremely critical and very concerned about it. But, it's interesting because the response, I want to acknowledge you guys, actually, because when I first came across the RSB last October and spent a few weeks going, oh my gosh, what on earth is this? And getting it ready to publish and published on my Substack. And you guys had me on to talk about it, I think, the day I published. So you broke it into the mainstream media or the media. You're nearly mainstream, aren't you? And you're a big part of those 23,000 submissions getting generated. So thanks for taking that brave step and doing that. That was really bringing it to the people for the first time. And following those submissions, we had, the lobby group, the New Zealand Initiative, who it was their predecessor, the Business Roundtable, that wrote the thing in the first place. They were like, it's not ideological. There's nothing to see here. It's just about transparency. And then we had Richard Prebble came out a couple of days later and said, this law is so important, it could be New Zealand's Magna Carta, and perhaps hadn't got the message that we're going, there's nothing to see here, guys, is the kind of line. But I think when they say there's nothing to see here, it's not ideological. That says to me that maybe they really are quite strong libertarians, because some libertarians will say that libertarianism isn't an ideology. It's just fundamental rights that have existed since time immemorial. So a bit more like a fundamental religion almost. So it's very concerning, and I hope everyone listening has written a submission or is about to.
I haven't done one yet. I put my hand up, but I definitely am going to do one. Now, I thought it was Friday. I was going to do it tomorrow, but Chewie, Chewie, I'm running 4 fucking podcasts at the moment. I'm going to do it.
You.
I know, but the reason I haven't done it is so you can keep reminding me, and then you can remind everybody else at the same time, because I definitely will be doing it.
Don't be like Pat, chat.
Let's just wrap up with a few listener questions, or viewer questions, I should say. Will it be possible for the RSB to be reversed if there is a change in government? That's what Charlie wants to know.
Yeah, good question. Probably. It should be able to be repealed. There may be some tricky things in international agreements that may interact with that, but both Labour and the Greens have said that they will repeal it. Hopefully it would be repealed, but we really do need to stop it passing if at all possible, because a lot of damage could still be done with it next year, and if there's another term of this government.
I think if we have learned anything about Prime Minister Luxon, is that he is a spineless jellyfish, and if they get 200,000-300,000 submissions where 95% of people go hells to the no, that might be enough for him to go populist. I can't do this. I mean, we don't trust this government even when they say the right thing. But I mean, why take the risk? Everyone should just get in there and get it done.
I think we need to make it politically untenable for them to keep progressing it. And one of the ways to do that, I think, is to, really build awareness about the everyday impacts for people. For example, like, if the government wanted to break up supermarket monopolies, then that would be a regulatory taking potentially, and they'd have to compensate, or the framework would set up that expectation that supermarkets would be compensated And so the taxpayer would foot the bill, which would probably lead to similar cost even if the prices were lower. You'd be paying through your taxes, or likewise with price caps on supermarket and electricity prices, their lost profit would potentially have to be made up by cash payments to the corporation recovered from the customers.
But this is how you know that they're full of crap with David Seymour. Oh, we shouldn't be spending a cent more of the public's money than we need to be. Don't stop, less tax, stop, because what you're saying is actually echoed in a question that actually looks at the last question as well. Wahiki says, is it true that if the bill goes through that it can't be repealed due to a clause that affected parties, i.e. corporations, will have to be compensated for their projected profits? So the way you've just described it means foodstuffs, whatever the other one's called, they get broken up, they get compensated. That's taxpayer money paying for it. Yet on the other side of his three mouths, David Seymour is saying we're not going to waste any taxpayer money at all. Again, unless maybe it goes to corporations. So I know that you've just said that it probably can be repealed, but I guess Wahiki's picking up on that idea about affected parties. Maybe that means it'll be more untenable. It might be harder to repeal because then the public is going to have to go to the next polls with a government that they've just had to pay out $1 billion to corporations because they broke them up. So maybe whilst it might still be possible, they'll be less keen to do it because of the blowback, perhaps, potentially?
Potentially. There's all these layers of the political pressure and the public backlash because they're, doing something which is outside of the responsible regulation. The bill says itself that it doesn't create legal rights itself. And so most of the rights for compensation would come through the review of other legislation and the integration of those rights in the other legislation. But the bill itself would still set up significant opportunities for judicial review. For example, limiting tobacco labelling or advertising of fossil fuel industries could lead to regulatory takings or judicial review of the process for those decisions. Even things like minimum wage and health and safety and holidays, they're all set by regulation, and the RSB really favours deregulation. So could be a lot less protections for workers and favouring the property rights of business and profits, which of course are property as well as labels and things. So it's quite complex, and I'll be really interested to see the expert submissions of some of those key legal experts around exactly how, those aspects that the person asking the question was raising.
How about just one more question, I think. Kiwibird just wants to say the bill must be cast into the fires of Mount Doom because in every New Zealand-based show there must be a Lord of the Rings mention at some point. It's the law. That was a law passed by Peter Jackson when he was Prime Minister, I think. Fetu Marama says this is interesting. By corporations, do they include corporate iwi entities? Because that ought to scare the crap out of national New Zealand First voters. Very interesting question.
Yeah, I think they probably would be included if they're like, a corporation or a legal entity. The issue perhaps with what's being thought about here is, can that entity then sue for impacts? So we probably need to be clear that the regulatory takings are only if legislation or regulation impacts and restricts your property right. And the assumption is that you can do whatever with your property. And the only reasons to limit what you can do with it or your individual rights is if it affects another individual or corporation's property rights, not for the reasons of the public good or the environment or te tiriti. So it's reversing the polluter pays principle. It's kind of like pay the polluter. And so the question here would be, well, would the iwi entity want to complain to government that the government was implementing regulation to look after the environment and therefore they want compensation because they wanted to trash the environment? So it still comes back to those principles and values. Are your values reflected in those principles? And if not, you're probably not going to want to complain that legislation's inconsistent with the principles because you actually do value the environment. So you'd want legislation to be inconsistent. So yeah, it gets kind of complex. I think there's one space where there could be some significant interest and opportunities for iwi, which is in the areas where for example, the river Te Awa Tupua, Whanganui River, has legal personhood, so it's a legal person. So there's some interesting questions there. But treaty settlement legislation and the Marine and Coastal Areas Act are excluded from the RSB. And so your instant reaction is, oh, that's good, because they're left to just do their thing as they are. But there's a couple of key things here. One is that most treaty settlements include a commitment to a new relationship under Te Tiriti or Waitangi, based in the treaty and the principles, and with them being excluded from the compulsory consideration for lawmaking, that's a real breach of those settlements. But also with the exclusion of those treaty settlements and the Marine and Coastal Area Act, it means that they're excluded from this fair compensation clause. So treaty settlements are usually 1 or 2% of what was lost, not what anyone would consider fair. And likewise with the pending changes to the Marine and Coastal Area Act, it would be, really kind of cutting off that possibility of fair compensation for those adjustments to property rights through the RSB. So again, very, very complex. And I'd encourage that person to check out the tool and explore some of the questions with their iwi or their area of interest.
Cool. We'll definitely bring that QR code one more time before the end. But I think, Chewie, you wanted to leave Gold's question for the last anyway, because we are going to ask the last question, asked in the spirit of Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. Gold just wants to know, why is David? That's it. Why?
Yeah, good question.
I think that's a question that's going to linger in my brain.
Is that a rhetorical question? He maki hoi. Yeah, I mean, I think we can personalize it to David, but I think that's actually not wise, because if it wasn't him, it would be someone else. This bill's been around since long before him, as was the Treaty Principles Bill. Its first iteration was introduced also in 2006. And so these are ideas that are based in ideology that goes back, many, many decades, and, covers, is around the globe. So, he's the actor in this instance. But if we make it too much about him, he gets a lot of attention, and it's actually about the ideas and the ideology, and it's about not just pushing back against that, but it's about what kind of country do we live in. This is setting out to shape his dream of our future, but what's our vision and what's our dream, and how do we express that and work towards that, I think, is really what people are coming together around over this. We're realizing that Te Tiriti is the environment, is our social well-being, is our health, is our public services. There's a huge push in the RSB against redistribution and, could really tilt towards privatisation. So all these things are interconnected, and it's an awful thing to be facing and fighting, but it's also a great opportunity to really pull together and imagine a much better future, I think.
Okay, there's the sector-specific tool for the regulatory standards, but up there again, tinyurl.com/RSB tool, QR code there again. If it's been too quick for you and you've missed it each time, remember this broadcast stays on whatever platform it is you're watching it on, other than Twitch actually, but all the other ones, after it's finished recording, and this will be a clip tomorrow as well, if you want to share that around. Hey, Melanie, thanks for jumping in and giving us some time tonight. Is there anything in particular you want to leave us with before we head off?
No, I think that's great. Just, make sure you make a submission, however short. If you want to do some extra thinking, please do that. And as well as making a submission, tell 3 other people about this bill and that it's bound to affect something they care about, and encourage them to find out what that might be. Because, there's still, a huge number of people aren't too aware of it, and submissions close Monday. And this is a really critical time to give such a strong message to National and New Zealand First that we don't want it, and to the opposition parties that if it passes they have the mandate to repeal it. So, yeah, thank you for all your work and coverage.
Oh, no problems. I was also going to say, and if you want to know more about it, 7 p.m. tomorrow night with Tanya Waikato, I'm sure she will be pulling out the big guns, literally the big guns, and throwing down a bit more about what we need to look out for. Melanie,
That'll
thanks
be
so much for
amazing.
joining us.
This is like the pre-act.
We're the opening act.
Incredible.
Perfect.
Yeah, encourage everyone to come along tomorrow night, and I'll try and listen in too. Those guys are doing
Melanie.
amazing work.
Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be in touch super soon, and stay close. If you ever need anything, just reach out, and we're here.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate what you do.
Cheers.
All the best.
Kia ora.
Bye-bye.